Hello and welcome to another episode of Agency Leadership Live. I'm your host, Chip Griffin, and today is the first of a number of these episodes where we will focus on the future of small agencies. Most of you listening and watching here are probably leaders of small agencies yourselves, or maybe you're thinking about starting your own agency, and so hopefully there will be some good insights here. And I am really pleased to be able to kick this off today with a good friend and long time, I guess you've been a client of mine, I've been a client of yours. So Matt Cookson of Cookson Communications here in New Hampshire is with me. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Great to be here virtually with you, Chip. Yes, it's been, at least a dozen years, I think, of very diverse relationships and some fun projects that we've partnered on over the years.
Absolutely. And, normally we get to see each other in person periodically, but given all that's been going on, we've just been connecting virtually. And I am glad that you agreed to be a guinea pig on this first ever bringing together using all of this software and live on YouTube and Facebook.
I know we've all become such technicians over the past 3 or 4 months, but the tools are great. I mean, really, we've proven that you can do your job remotely. I missed the lunches, Chip. Those are fun and informative, but it's working.
Those were good lunches, and I do look forward to getting back to them at some point. But I think we have learned a lot in the last few months about all that you can do remotely, and it's forced a lot of us to find ways to innovate. I mean, all of this studio that I've set up around here in order to put shows like this together has been a real learning experience, and I think will benefit me even once we go back to whatever that new normal is.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be with us at a certain level forever. And from the agency perspective, I mean, I've been doing Google Hangout. I probably started doing Google Hangouts in 2012 because I had a client that was in 4 different states, and obviously you don't want to jump on a plane every time. So, but I do remember that those days that the Hangout was a little rough at times, and probably, if you're on a Hangout call for 60 minutes, you probably spent 20 minutes dealing with technical issues or wondering why someone dropped off and you're trying to find them. So I think the technology's come a long, long way since then.
Yeah, and of course, there are always the kinks to work out, and the dirty little secret here that nobody saw before I hit the live button at noon was that we had to work through a few technical difficulties to make sure that we were good to go. But fortunately, we managed to start right on time, which is always
Right.
fun in this universe.
Yes, lesson to self: buy the camera a few days before doing this format instead of an hour before. But that's okay. We muddled through it.
that can help, but it's sometimes fun to tinker at the last minute. But in any case, enough about the nuances of putting together a show like this. Let's sort of start talking about the topic at hand, which is the future of small agencies. And before we do that, I will say, if you are watching this live on YouTube or Facebook, please feel free to use the comments to put in any questions or comments that you'd like us to address, and I will try to keep an eye on them throughout the show and touch on them. So let's make this as interactive as possible. But so Matt, as you look at everything that has transpired over the last 3 months, what are some of the lessons that you've learned that you're going to be able to apply to your own business, and that you think perhaps others might be able to as well?
Yes, it's definitely been a learning experience over this time. So we're a small agency. We're about 7 people. We are 10 years old, full service communications. So we also work in the area of public relations, content creation, creative design, branding, digital services, custom consulting services. So a full range of services. And some of the lessons learned, you immediately, you can't predict the future. This was an event that occurred that no one could have really prepared for. Who would have thought that we weren't getting on planes, that we weren't going to events? I think we all remember sort of the slow roll of like, okay, now we're bumping elbows, now we're waving, now we're not going to events, and oh geez, and they're canceling basketball. And I think the NCAA was the first one to go. But so that immediate shrinkage of losing your interaction And one of the first things that we did as an agency is we reached out to all of our current clients and said, "We're here. We're turning off the clock for the most part. We need to help you through." And I'm sure there are other agency folks out there that we call them our COVID clients in some ways, because we have a fair number of clients in the healthcare area. And so we had a couple clients literally that we were rolling out some conventional PR and marketing strategies for them for recruitment. And take nursing homes, for example. Suddenly they're shut down. And the recruiting for nursing homes, so nursing homes do their training in-house. They couldn't allow visitors. So what we really learned is be there as a partner for your clients, help them through these challenges, and realize the playbook just went out the window. And so the pivoting was, pivoting is one of those great 2020 words, right, Chip? That's everyone's is be there, really get to understand their model, the challenges they're facing, and pivot with them. But the partnership thing is rather key. And we all knew that certain aspects were going away. So another big one that we learned is like your lovely studio. We had planned video shoots, with clients. We had clients doing events. We had, I think, 2 trade show booths that we were going to be working on. Those things, trade shows are, those companies were quick to cancel those trade show booths, for sure. So I think having a diverse range of resources and services that you can provide to the companies and partnering was absolutely key. I think, frankly, the biggest probably challenge for small agencies and larger agencies too is your pipeline and business development, and losing the face-to-face and coming up with other ways to do business development was challenging. I'm sure that's something we'll probe in more detail, Chip.
Yeah, and let's jump right into that, because how have you made changes to how you're doing business development?
The biggest change is certainly soft selling. Don't be pushy. I think everyone feels this, but the once obviously people slowed down with some of the consistent email marketing, but being overly email marketed to during this time was a major turnoff to me, and I unsubscribed from so many things because I just felt their tone and tenor was wrong. What I did is I just contacted people and checked in with them. Hey, just want to make sure everything's safe, you're doing okay. Phone calls. I picked up the phone, tried to call people. So I tried to do 5 or 6 a day, just purely checking in and saying hi. No selling at all, and just have the conversation and let it come naturally, and see how you can help people. So business development was really a lot about helping current clients in different ways, and we had some clients grow, expand their services in this time. And then the second one was the prospect list, and just saying, hey, these are strange times, fully understand what you're going through, just let us know if we can help in any way. And I think that was appreciative, and helped us stay stable through this process. The other thing I'd add is we were very fortunate, because about 2 or 3 years ago we started diversifying into grants. And so we have several state agency grants in New Hampshire, and those too had to pivot to COVID-related issues, because they were primarily in education and healthcare. And talk about 2 sectors that just had their lives flipped upside down. Those are probably the 2 for the most part. So I think diversification of revenue, diversification of client, staying close to clients, being respectful of the situation, and obviously looking at your bottom line too. What do you need? What can go? Are you using all your services? Those are all really important things. And the last item I'd reflect on too, and I think this one's really important, is this was a great time to go back to clients and say, listen, things have changed. You might have slowed down. Is your message, are you on message? Is your website on message? Are your materials there? Does it align with your business plan? How have you adjusted your business plan? How do you want to re-reflect that on your communications materials? This is a good time to sort of handle those internal issues. And we actually had several clients say, yeah, it's time to do the website, for example.
Right. Well, and I think, now is a great time for all businesses to sort of, hit the pause button, maybe hit the reset button, and really think about what it is that you're doing and how you're doing it. And that goes for agency clients, but it goes, I think, for the agencies themselves, right? I mean, you need to look at the way that you're set up, what you're doing, where you're based, who your clients are. I think all of those things ought to be in play, and you should at least think about it. Doesn't mean you need to go make drastic changes, but you should at least be contemplating it.
Right. Right. And, I was telling you this story a little while ago, that when we went through this, and we already did remote working probably 30% of the time. And obviously then we went to, 80, 90% of the time. And now we're probably at 50% of the time. We're going to stay that way for the foreseeable future. So I looked at my office space and my needs, and I was concerned about growing out of the space. And frankly, now with remote working, I think we could double our staff in the same place. So I went to my landlord, renegotiated a lease, had him do some upgrades, and we're here to stay. So there's things like that that you could definitely do in these times. And like you said too.
Let me stop you there, because that's a question that I get a lot from agency owners. Is how do I deal with my lease, right? Because generally speaking, commercial leases are for multiple years. It's not like renting an apartment where you get to review it every year. So how did you handle approaching your landlord? What was their reaction? How did you work those things through?
Well, we're in our 10th anniversary in the same space, so I used that happy anniversary piece to my landlord, and right. We're in a freestanding, fairly large building, and our tenant below us is a restaurant. And any business owner, any landlord with a restaurant these days is probably a little nervous that they're going to lose a major tenant. So I basically was able to go to them and say, I love this location. We can walk to like 100 restaurants from here. It's a great location in downtown Manchester, New Hampshire. And we want to stay here and we want to grow here, but there's some things in the building that need to be addressed with that. But in exchange, I will sign a multiple year lease, and he was good with that. Mm-hmm. So that worked out really well. And I know where you're going too. I have friends in commercial real estate. There's a lot of businesses are downsizing. At the same time, we're also seeing some businesses need more space because they're trying to spread people out.
Right.
So it's a little double-edged. But as we said before, there definitely were business owners that I know that were very, very resistant to remote working, and they've changed their tune. They're like, it works.
Right. I mean, you for years you had businesses say that they couldn't work remotely, and then essentially overnight they became remote businesses, and it didn't go nearly as bad as a lot of people feared. Now, obviously, a chunk of that is because of the pandemic, there was a greater level of understanding for all of the challenges that remote work creates, right? So, last year, if you were doing a Zoom call and you had a kid come running in the background, it was probably a lot more annoying to your colleagues or your clients than it is today, right? And now we've become accustomed to watching that Zoom call where, Sally or Johnny comes, flying into frame, jumping into mom or dad's lap and saying, hey, right? So I think there is something to be said about the shared understanding of the circumstances that has helped smooth that transition. At the same time, I think we have learned that you certainly can be productive remotely. Although I do worry that too many people are thinking, particularly in the agency space, that remote work may now be the answer. And for a lot of employees, remote work it's doing okay now, but it's not a long-term solution for them. Particularly, we always think of parents, but it's the younger workers are the ones that I'm really focused on, because I think they're overlooked. And a lot of the 20-somethings have roommates. They don't have a home office. They're not in circumstances that are conducive to working remotely. So I think we need to think about that too as agency owners, agency leaders, and how we deal with that.
I think you're absolutely right. I remember being about 4 weeks into this, and everyone was working from home and saying, "This is really working." Before I decided to renovate the space and contact my landlord, and so we did our staff meetings by Zoom. Of course, we do those every week, and yeah, about the 4 week mark, I'm thinking, do we really even need an office, et cetera? And then you find the little things that don't necessarily happen in the casual conversations when you're in touch with each other in the same space. And I talked to the entire staff, and we all realized, and everyone said, we like this, but we miss each other. We miss the interaction, and really want that blend. And I think you're spot on the younger workers, and certainly the urban workers too. But the younger worker, they need that mentoring. They need that day-to-day camaraderie that you just don't get, by looking at someone in a camera, and they'll perform better, I think, and they'll learn better. And then then the urban areas, three guys in a 900 square foot apartment in Cambridge, all on Zoom, trying to share the kitchen table. Just that's not going to work.
Right, and cleaning up all the beer bottles from the night before, and
what's in my background?
and kicking that dirty laundry under the couch, whatever you need to do.
Right.
But I think we struck a nerve with this one. We've gotten a couple of comments in on Facebook about this, and saying that it is important to be thinking about the younger folks, and also that there's no one size fits all solution.
Right.
And I think those are really important things that agency owners need to think about. And I think particularly, if you think about it, in the agency world, a huge proportion of our employees as agency leaders comes from people who are parents or people who are, single or young,
Sure.
and perhaps in roommate type situations. So it's disproportionate as compared to some other industries, I think.
I think so too. We've gotten very used to, one of my colleagues, I don't know why, but this cat likes the camera. So, the cat's always strolling in front of the camera. And I mentioned we do a lot of work in education. So we've been online with teachers, always kids in the rooms. And, some of the families have seen this where they were child sharing for the most part with a small group. So, one day the person wouldn't have no kids there, and the next they'd have six. And, just respect that, that's what they have to get done. But I know a lot of people that were really clamoring to get back into the office,
right?
And respecting social distancing and all that, but just wanting to have those human conversations. What we do here a lot of times is we have walking meetings. So we'll go walk around and just chat about a client or a subject, but we'll just go around 5 blocks or et cetera. But that leads to different conversations that you're just not going to have. So,
right. The old West Wing walk and talk.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Which, when I worked in Washington, I had a lot of walk and talk meetings, because it was sometimes the only way that you could particularly get the boss, the congressman or the senator's time, if you were having your meeting that way. But
right.
But I think you've now raised another good point. So it's not just remote working; it's also the flexible work hours and work arrangements.
Yes.
Because if you are in a situation, and it certainly seems likely that this fall here in the U.S. we're not going to be back to business as usual in schools. It is every school district that I've heard of so far that has announced even semi-concrete plans seems to be saying that there's going to be a component of virtual learning still.
Right.
And so, if you've got kids at home, that throws a wrench into your schedule. And so I think agency owners are going to continue to need to be flexible, and that's going to particularly impact the smaller agencies, where if you've got a team of 4 or 5 and you've got 2 who have kids and need to have flexible schedules, what does that mean for your business?
That's spot on. You're right. This isn't going to go anywhere. We've got bumps in the road coming. I have 2 kids in college, and I'm always intrigued. Like every other day, the plans seem to change for the fall. So I think flexibility is key. We've always done flexible. We don't have set hours in our firm. I think we view, and I think this is becoming more common, instead of hours, we view performance and client services as the key. And how many people out there, a month or 2 ago said, "What day is it? Does it matter? No. Is it noon?" I remember going for a walk and saying good morning to someone, and they started laughing. And we realized it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And then we just both chuckled and said, "It doesn't matter." So, the scheduling thing, I think you do it when you can. You respect people as best you can. We know client emergencies come up. But one thing that with a small agency and something that we always do is you can't be a lone wolf. You need to inform your colleagues of what you're doing and have at least one other person have a full understanding of the client needs so that they can jump in if you're not available. That to me is absolutely critical.
And how do you see all of this coming together, and the sort of the competitiveness of the small agency versus the mid or large agency? Because that's I think to me that's an interesting dynamic. The vast majority of agencies are small, are 50 employees or less. The number that are over 50 employees are much smaller. How do you see that landscape being impacted by all of these changes, if at all, or is it just really more of the same?
Well, I mean, we've been going through this slow change in the media world, as everyone knows. The decline of traditional media, the increase of social media, the blending of marketing and communications, those are all trend lines that we've seen. I think we've also seen, even more recently, I think a lot of the traditional media outlets are struggling with advertising revenues, and we've seen layoffs of more media and more reporters. So I think, small agencies, we've got to be really, really focused on our landscape and our customers and on the changing sands under our feet for the most part. Two things I would specifically mention in this area. The first, as we lose traditional media, there is this whole undercurrent of, smaller, more organic media. So, thinking about hyper local in terms of communication. So, for example, in this particular state, we've got a Manchester Inklink, which is founded by a journalist and really good writing and thoughtful, and she takes donations to support her efforts. We've got an in-depth online, very deep into politics coverage. The Patches. We have a coalition of media called Granite State News Collaborative, and they share stories amongst each other. So I think all those stories are digital, and they're going to find life elsewhere. So mining those kinds of media properties and services. More and more people are relying on these now. They want news. It might not be the traditional news. So understanding those shifts is really, really key because it happens quickly. The second thing I'd say too is as we go remote, and this is as firm owners and as servicing our clients, we need to pay real good attention to internal communications right now. Because if we're not in touch with each other, and if our clients are not in touch with their employees and everyone's remote, people are curious, people have questions. It might be time to bring back that digital newsletter or some kind of regular internal communications functions, because people can feel very disconnected very quickly, and they might not ask the question. They might be shy. They're not going to ask a personal question on a Zoom call with every other staff person. So what can you do for your clients and for your team to make sure they're being communicated to? I think this is probably going to be a wave of need out there.
Yeah, and I think that you've touched on something important there, which is when it comes to internal communications, you can't rely just on these group Zoom calls as the primary driver. You need to have one-on-one conversations, particularly with your team, also with your clients, but particularly with your team, because that's where someone will feel comfortable expressing some concern that they may have that you need to be aware of. And so I think it's critically important that as firms that were in an office and used to having those one-on-one water cooler conversations, as you lose those, you need to build those in proactively into your remote communications planning to make sure that you are not missing out on the important signals from your team.
Yeah, I think that's right, and it ties into something you mentioned earlier, Chip, too, which is we have these people's lives that were disrupted, and they've got 2 or 3 kids running around, and they're trying to do their job, and trying to hold on as best as possible, and having those one-on-one conversations to say, don't worry about it. If you want to log on at working at 10 o'clock, that's fine. PM, that is, to get your job done, or we're going to give you a lot of space and latitude, right now, because you're valued, and these changes are extremely stressful. So piling on, how do I perform my job when you're trying to raise 2 or 3 kids, and and you can't get out to the grocery store, and there's no toilet paper. A lot of aggravations, let alone obviously the fear of getting sick.
Right. And actually, that fear of getting sick and those concerns, I think that also goes to how you reopen your office too, right? And that can be whether you have a soft reopen or, we're officially reopening or whatever. You've got to address the individual concerns that folks may have from a health standpoint that you may not even frankly be aware of. And that's a delicate area, as I've talked about previously on the podcast and other places, because you're treading into an area that, as a business owner, you generally don't want to be anywhere near, and that is health issues related to your employees, because it opens up all sorts of HR and legal cans of worms. But you've got to make sure that you are considering the concerns that employees might have in that respect, because they may not want to be totally open with you, but you need to accept if they say, hey, I've got a reason that I need to be staying home, I'm at higher risk, or I've got a family member who's at higher risk, and you need to be willing to leave it there and not insist on a diagnosis to get there.
Right, and that means you've got to have the one-on-one conversations.
Exactly.
Folks. We did the soft reopening, like you mentioned, when they in our state, when the governor eliminated the stay-at-home order, and I would say we have the full team here 1 to 2 days a week, and we're fortunate to have enough space where we can distance. But everyone had their own option. If they wanted to come back, great. If not, don't worry about it. No stress, no pressure. But the bottom line is, people they really miss the camaraderie.
Right.
Yeah.
So did you have everybody decide to come back, or most people come back?
We had everybody decide to come back for a couple days a week, and then pretty much everyone else, we're probably 50% back for the most part. But it's good to have the whole team here for a couple days.
Yep.
Those are the days we do staff meetings and really do more collaborative work.
Right. Now you had mentioned the changing landscape when it comes to media, and I think that's that is one of the stories that has not fully been told yet. But we've certainly seen substantial layoffs amongst a lot of media outlets. There is this shift towards more non-traditional media. All these changes have been in place before, but they've certainly been accelerated. As an agency that's involved in communications and has certain specialties, how do you look at the changing landscape and what you need to do with your own capabilities? Are you looking at ways to expand what your capabilities are, or are you drilling down on what you've specialized in previously and just trying to become even better at what's still out there? How do you look at that? Because I think that's something that a lot of smaller agencies struggle with is, what's the right service mix, and how do they make sure that they're getting the right kind of attention for their clients and the projects that they're working on?
Yeah, that's the $100,000 question in a lot of ways. If it's all about visibility,
that's what I get paid for here, Matt, to ask those big, tough questions. Yeah. I am paid millions of dollars for hosting in this chair.
People want to be seen, and so I think it's much more customized than ever before. So we have to niche down to okay, who are you trying to reach? What are they looking at? And how can we get you in front of them and get super focused? And also, we understanding that journalists are stretched these days. We need, and we've been moving towards this way for a long time, of moving to storytelling, blogging, and also when we do craft media pieces, we craft them thinking like a journalist. I've had the fortune of going to journalism school and learning that style of writing early on. But if you can present a well thought out story with multiple perspectives, multiple quotes, and some good facts and trends to a reporter, and they only need to make small tweaks, and they trust you, they're gonna be happy about that. And then the other piece is writing copy that can be used in multiple places and multiple channels. So for the web, for social, to push out as a blog. I think, in some ways, and I hope this is the case because I like them, but I think possibly human interest stories are going to come back because there's so many powerful stories, right now. We've got obviously the healthcare heroes we hear about all the time. But I think people are taking, and I'm doing this too, people are taking a little more time these days to look at things, to contemplate, to read, to walk, to think, to meditate. Um, and, but they're also out there, finding their own information. So there's no one good answer. I think Chip, it's a ton of customization right now.
Right, right. Well, I think that it also comes down to experimentation as well, and you have to be willing to try different things, both as a business and on behalf of your individual clients, and frankly as individuals, and try to figure out what works. And I do think that one of the advantages, or silver linings, if you will, that's come out of this is that folks have been forced into going outside of their comfort zones on things to learn about them, and they may or may not end up continuing to use it as things revert to some more sense of normalcy, but things like video and Zoom calls.
Sure.
We all hear about Zoom fatigue and that sort of thing, but ultimately I think that increased use of video conferencing in particular, and video like this more generally, is actually beneficial, and I think will stick around. And the more that people come to learn about it, I think that folks will find good ways to integrate it within their agencies.
Yeah, I think so too, and I know that the clients appreciate the visuals for sure. And when I mentioned the list of services right at the beginning that we do, the last service I mentioned was consulting services. And what I find and found with a lot of our clients, especially a lot of our clients are longer term, is our key people really appreciate a one-on-one Zoom call. And it's not maybe just about PR, and it's not just about marketing, but it's an honest conversation of how's your business, what's changing, what's ahead, and how can we help. And just having that external sounding board for people is really, really helpful. And I know clients have said they just greatly appreciate that level of conversation. It ties to communications, but it's really a little more holistic way of serving the client.
Right. Well, and ultimately, I think when people talk about Zoom fatigue, it's really not so much about the medium or the tool. It's really about the fact that it's just meetings being scheduled for the sake of having meetings, which is frankly no different than we had when we were all in offices together. I can't tell you how many meetings I've gone to over the years, sitting in a conference room and saying, why am I here? What's the point? This is my 10th meeting of the day. So I don't think you need to blame Zoom or video conferencing for this. I think this is just sort of normal management behavior.
Oh my gosh, yeah. We've all had those. The trick about Zoom versus the conference call is you can see when someone's dozing off and the hands are on the keyboard, and they're not really all there. That's been happening for years. But one thing, with Zoom and doing less face-to-face meetings is, I love the face-to-face meeting. I think it's critical, especially when you're in the early phase of working with a client. It's great, but Zoom is a good replacement. But think about, the time it takes to travel, to prep all that. When you're in person, the meetings are probably longer. So I found myself with 5, 10, 15 extra hours a week that was spent with travel and lunches and dinners and all that. And, how can you take that time and repurpose it to benefit your agency? And it's a great time to really do some strategic planning and thinking about, basically everything that we've talked about for the past half hour, and how that impacts your business, and then try to future forward that.
Yeah, and I think, look, video opens up tremendous possibilities because, as you say, it can be very time consuming. I spent, over the last 20 years, probably I spent half of that on the road traveling for work. And the amount of, it's not just the time, it's also the energy. And I take energy from the meetings that I have on the road, but most of it then gets absorbed by the actual process of the travel. And so, having the opportunity to use video in place of at least some of that travel, I think will be beneficial over the long term. And as people accept these kinds of meetings more during this period of time, I think that's certainly helpful. But I think the other thing is it opens up more possibilities for who you can work with. And as an agency, that may mean other agencies that you collaborate with. It may mean clients that you work with, because you're no longer limited by how easy it is to travel to them if you can set up, really good video connections, have the meetings. You can now, for some of these shows, I bring in whiteboards so I can draw and write, and God, you don't really want to see my handwriting or my drawing, but it's just as good or bad, if you will, as it was on a whiteboard in a conference room. And so if you can start bringing together all of these different types of collaboration, I think it can be really beneficial in opening more doors to you. And for small agencies, you need to find ways to have those force multipliers that allow you to get more done and access greater resources and broader client bases.
Yeah, it's here to stay, and you've got really nice quality on your end. I need to work on mine a little bit, but I think it's important for folks to just set it up, to have private spaces for it, to have their Zoom shirts ready. I didn't know Zoom shirts were a thing until I heard about that yesterday, I believe. We've all been pummeled with the Zoom jokes, etc. But but making it as meaningful as possible. And one of the things that I do too, the meetings were always scheduled, hour and a half, etc. I do a lot of 45-minute Zoom calls, and try to have that 15 in between to digest, to take those notes, to sort of decompress, which is what we would have got when we were traveling, Chip.
Right.
So we'd have a car ride, we'd have that little time in the airport to take notes, etc. Instead of just back to back to back. I think that the lesson learned is don't do 7 hours of Zoom meetings in a day.
Mm-hmm.
That's not productive. Spread them out, and try to have that thinking time in between.
Right, and Roxanne has pointed out something that is not really an issue for me, and that is Zoom hair and makeup. There's not enough makeup that I could apply to make a difference, and the hair, well, that kind of goes without saying, doesn't it? So, but yes, I mean you're absolutely right, and I think it is, that is absolutely challenging. I mean, heck, all you have to do is watch some of the talking heads on TV to see all of the challenges that folks have, and you clearly have folks who are have that the CNN shirt or the MSNBC shirt, and having to do some degree of makeup. But we're also learning a lot about lighting and camera positioning and those kinds of things.
Right.
That I think will benefit all of us over the long term, and not everybody needs to dabble in it quite as much as I have over the past few months. And but it's if you enjoy it, great, you can invest time in it. If not, you just need to put a little bit of extra effort in, and you can start getting much better results.
Yeah, no, funny quick story, but I think it was last week or the week before when they announced that the Segway was being discontinued. I got a text at 8 o'clock at night from one of the producers at a TV station. They wanted to see if I would jump on an interview to talk about it, because I rode one around the founder's house early on. It was really, really fun, and this reporter knew that. So my wife was watching TV in the living room, so that was out. My son was in my office area, that was out. So basically the station just wanted to do a Zoom interview. So I wound up going to my basement and setting up my laptop on top of an ice cooler that had the right height, and backed myself up, and we have dimmer lights in there, and I was able to set up an impromptu studio for an interview. But how fun is that? I mean, that television wouldn't have done that interview 6 months ago because of concerns about quality and video. Now they do them all the time.
Yeah, and I think that will, that's going to have some serious or cause some serious change in the media industry itself, which obviously is a bit afield for us, but we're all dealing with the media, so it does matter. And I think a lot of media outlets have realized they don't necessarily need all of the fancy studios and cameras and satellite trucks for everything. There's a lot of opportunity to be had in more affordable, accessible gear, and that gives you access to more people and potential for more stories in more places. And so I think ultimately it can expand the media over time as they figure out how to adapt to it, and it improves their own business economics, right? Because the reason why media has been having challenges is because they haven't figured out, in many cases, how to turn a profit. If you can reduce your equipment costs and your staffing costs by being more efficient and more creative, that opens a lot of doors as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way that television station was going to send a truck to my house to do an interview like that. It just
Right.
wouldn't happen. That's a
Are you sure?
non-starter.
Come on, Matt. I think you are at the top of the list for the satellite truck pulling up in front.
If that happens, it's probably not for the right reason.
Well, there's that. Yes, it probably would be associated with crime scene tape somewhere,
Yes,
which
yes.
is
The
which is not what you want to see.
eating or burning, right?
Right. Right. Well, I guess as we sort of bring this conversation to its conclusion, are there tips in particular that we haven't addressed that you'd suggest that small agency owners might want to take advantage of, or things that they should be thinking about as they look ahead to the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months? The future seems so much more narrow now, and none of us are really looking out 3 or 5 years anymore, I don't think.
No. I would say the one that we didn't touch upon is partnerships and collaboration. So if you're a small agency and you have resources in PR and marketing and writing, but you're not strong on the digital side, maybe you want to form a strategic partnership with a digital firm instead of trying to build everything out yourself. So that maybe there's more power of 2 to 1. Not necessarily a merger, but really some kind of close collaboration, so that you have those resources in house, so that you can bob and weave with these changing times and be able to serve people. So that's certainly one that comes to mind. And obviously the gig economy is here for good. If anything, this has accelerated that. So there's a lot of talented people out there that you could tap to help right now, and especially a lot of people might be out of work, especially if they're on event management or some of those areas that just got really hurt by this and social distancing. So try to tap those talents. I think you're right, Chip. It's not looking out 3 to 5 years. We're looking out 3 to 6 months right now.
Right.
And I think that the other key thing is aggressive marketing is not what people are looking for right now. I think they're looking for help. They're looking for partners, and they're looking for someone that can help them through and navigate with them as a partner through uncharted waters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'd like to, the beauty here is we don't have commercial breaks that I'm wed to, so I can add a couple of minutes to the show if I want. So I'm going to do that here, because you brought up partnerships, and actually yesterday's episode of Chats with Chip was a conversation with Jeremy Jackson of Shift Lab about partnerships that he has. He has a digital agency, and so it's a partnership between front end and back end agency shops. But as folks are trying to figure out how to do more digital, and frankly, just about every client of every agency is probably doing more digital today than they were 6 months ago. How do you look at setting up a successful partnership with another agency, particularly a digital one? How do you find the right partner? How do you manage that relationship? I mean, what advice would you have? Because I know that you've worked with digital agencies in the past as well.
We have. So I think it was last fall we realized that we wanted to make a shift in that area, and we had been. So what I try to do is I try to bring in various people for various secondary tasks that I can outsource. And in some ways, I'm testing them out as someone or an agency that could have a greater role. So after a lot of thinking and testing out, we did enter into a strategic partnership with a digital firm, especially in the area of back-end web and digital marketing. But I tested it for probably a year and a half, and it's not only the skills, it's the personality, because really that's an extension of our team. And so it's definitely try before you buy. Recognize, and everyone in the agency world, you track your time. Those functions that might not be full time, but they're relatively significant. And is there someone that you'd really trust to bring that in? And when you look at partnerships, it needs to be a partnership. So what can that other agency bring to the table for you, as well as what you bring to that agency for them? So I think that's the true partnership, is finding someone else who recognizes the gap on their end and you recognize the gap that you can fill on your end, and that's the key. If not, it's more like a vendor relationship.
Right. I think that mutual benefit piece is really critical to establishing a true partnership, and true partnerships work a heck of a lot better than simply vendor-client relationships. Not that there's anything wrong with the vendor relationship; you can certainly, use that appropriately. But if you're really looking for a partnership, you need to have that two-way street where both sides are seeing value, both sides are getting value. Hopefully both sides are bringing clients to the table.
Right.
I've seen a lot of these agency partnerships where it's, they call it a partnership, but it really is just a vendor relationship because it's simply, one agency finds all the clients and farms out all the work. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but you shouldn't think of that as a partnership per se, because partnerships need to be that two-way street.
Yeah, and this partnership's worked out very, very well. So he's become our chief coder, but he also the head of this agency. But he also has very good client relation skills. But we've come along and we've been developing all the content for the websites, including pretty much full text or full editing. So, and that's not something he had in his wheelhouse. That he outsourced, to a variety of people. So we've found that nice niche. And then I think the other part to that, too, Chip, is beforehand having a good understanding of the financials behind that, and make no surprises. You can't have surprises with that.
Right. Well, and that's the importance of testing the waters, as you suggested too. You start slow as you build that relationship, get to know them. Don't jump right into saying, hey, this is a partnership. You really need to start to work together, see how your teams mesh, see if your work styles are appropriate. See what the quality of the actual work product is. There are so many things that you really want to make sure that you've got right before you take it to that next level. And I think that is a mistake that a lot of agencies make, is they jump too quickly into partnerships because they think it's a way to solve their problems as far as access to new clients or access to services or that kind of thing. And it really needs to be more methodical.
It totally does, because if you jump too quickly and you start meshing your services with 5, 7 clients and it doesn't work out, now you've got to unmesh that, and that can get a little messy at times. So that's sage advice, Chip.
And we don't like messy, so. But hopefully it doesn't look like we've had any big messes here on the show today, Matt. So I appreciate you being the guinea pig and jumping in here and allowing me to test the waters with putting together a live show with a guest. And you were a great first guest, so I do very much appreciate that. If someone is looking to learn more about Cookson Communications or you, Matt, where should they go?
They can go to cooksoncom.com. CooksonPR.com also works, and there's full contact information on there. They can email me at matt@cooksoncom.com.
Fantastic. Well, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate Matt's time. He's given us some great insight. I hope you'll check out his agency and learn more about him. If you have any of your own feedback on this episode, feel free to leave it in the comments on whatever platform you've seen this on, or drop me a line at chip@agencyleadership.com. And with that will bring to an end our show today, and I look forward to having you all back here live real soon.